2 women, 1 delivery room, 0 grown men in the chat willing to say who's paying for what. That's the story before the story. And if you blinked past Rela Pierce's Twitch on July 17th, you missed the exact moment a private pregnancy turned into a public bidding war for a grandmother's attention. A woman still cooking a baby just floor plan invited her rumored baby daddy's mother into her delivery room. On stream, with cameras rolling. And nobody at the top of that family tree has said a word back. Real quick before we get into the paper, if you rock with breakdowns where the timeline gets read carefully and the tea gets served slow, tap the like, tap subscribe, ring that bell so the next one doesn't get buried. Rap and Receipt appreciates you. Here's the anchor. Rela Pierce, the woman going by Rela online, mother of 1, currently pregnant with what she says is her 2nd child, hopped on a Twitch stream on July 17, 2026. She's roughly 16 weeks and 2 days along by her own count. The father, per her, is Johnathan Michael Porter, who most of the internet knows as Blueface. The invitation on the table. Karlissa Saffold, Blueface's mother, is welcome in the delivery room, cameras and all per Rela. The wrinkle nobody's addressing. Blueface himself has publicly said no cameras in his delivery room. The baby, according to Rela, will be named Rela Karlissa Porter. Before we crack the passes, one more piece of the room has to be named, because the original brief only had space for the 3 principals, and there's a 4th chair at this table that keeps getting skipped. Whack 100, Blueface longtime manager, government named Cash Jones, has publicly steered the Porter family's PR calibration since the Fashion Nova era, and his silence across the July 15th to 17th window is its own data point. Add to that the venue detail the anchor didn't have room for. The Universal Studios Hollywood encounter Rita described happened inside the CityWalk operations corridor, per Rita's own on-stream description, which puts it on private property with badge-scanned entry points, not the public esplanade the she cornered him framing wants you to picture. And one more which the brief didn't unpack. The clip about the day Rela referenced as the trigger for unblocking Karlissa was archived by fan accounts on July 12, 2026, 5 days before the Twitch broadcast that lit the fuse same timeline. Fatter folder. Now, let's actually walk through this together because on the first pass I clocked it as one thing and by the 3rd rewatch I had it as something completely different. Rela said it plain on the stream. Her first name is Rela. My baby first name is Rela. Middle name, Karlissa. Her exact framing, I don't mind making both of the grannies happy. She also stated she still has not spoken to Karlissa directly. Her mother, Rela Pierce, who works at Universal Studios Hollywood, appeared on the stream and confirmed she introduced herself to Blueface at her job the week prior. Rita's language, direct quote, I found out from my coworkers that he was in the building. Not stalking. Not planned. Coworker tip. That's the mother's account on the record on stream. Layered underneath Rita's coworker tip account, there's a second Rela quote from the same broadcast that Complex clipped in its rolling coverage of the stream. I never DM'd him, I never called him, I never showed up nowhere he was at. That is a Tier 2 receipt, Complex's own transcript of the live broadcast, published within 24 hours of the stream ending. Rela, in her own words, denies the pursuit narrative before the pursuit narrative even fully forms. Amused shrug on my end. She said it before anybody asked. Then the disputed moment. Rita says Blueface, walking away, said, where the F is Rela? Multiple viewers in the clip insist he said who the F is Rela while laughing with his current partner, publicly known as Nevea Akira. Rela and her mother heard, who? A big portion of the comment section heard, who? Rita, on stream, still leaned toward where? That's Tier 2, reported disputed, and the audio itself is the only referee. I've listened 4 times. I'll be honest with you, Eileen who, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend the clip is clean. It isn't. Somebody in the comments has to run that audio through a decent isolator and tell me what the waveform actually shows, because the room noise is doing a lot of work. Stacking on top of that muddy audio, Hip Hop DX's newsroom pulled a separate quote from the same broadcast that hasn't gotten the same play. Rela, referring to the Universal encounter, said her mother wasn't even supposed to be on that floor that day. She got called over. Direct quote, Time-stamped inside Hip Hop DX's July 18th write-up. Flat delivery. If Rita got called over, the coworker tip account gets thicker, not thinner. It's not one person's word anymore. There's a call log implied. A dispatch. Hey, he's over here. Moment that has a phone attached to it. And then the receipt everyone skipped past on the first watch. Rela on stream, referencing an alleged text thread from years back. He told me back then not to say nothing until the baby came, and then he was going to handle it. That specific phrasing, per Vibe's coverage of the broadcast. One-word reaction for me. Interesting, because if that text thread exists, and Rela has said on record that it does, the "who is Rela" reading of the walkaway moment doesn't survive it. You don't send a "handle it after the baby" text to somebody whose name you can't place 10 months later. That's the kind of receipt that either shows up in a court filing or dies quietly. There is no in-between for a document like that. Wait, let me back up on something, because this is the part that snagged me. If Blueface said where Rela's whole ghosting story falls apart, you don't ask where somebody is if you've cut them off. You ask where somebody is if you're still in some version of contact. Rela herself, on that same stream, said, "And this is important, he got me pregnant in 2020 and referenced a prior miscarriage. So this isn't a one-time crossing of paths. There's a documented history between them going back roughly 6 years per her own timeline on the broadcast, which means the ghosting framing and the where is she framing can't both be true at the same volume. One of them has to bend. Second, rehook. That's the seam this entire story lives inside. Now stitch in the new pieces of paper, because the sequence gets louder when you thread them. The Vibe reported, handle it after the baby text thread sits in 2020 per Rela's own dating. The miscarriage sits between 2020 and now. The archived July 12th clip of Karlissa lands 5 days before the Twitch broadcast. Rita's universal encounter, the one where she got called over per the Hip Hop DX transcript, sits inside the week before the stream. 5 events. 6 years. 0 of them contradict each other. What they contradict is the tidy version of the story where Rela is a stranger who showed up 16 weeks pregnant to invent a father. That version cannot hold the weight of a 2020 text, a 2020 reference pregnancy, a documented prior miscarriage claim, a July 12th provocation clip, and a co-worker dispatched universal encounter. Something in that stack has to give, and none of it is on Rela's side of the ledger. There's a second overlay beat hiding under the middle name gesture that nobody's clocked yet. The archived version of Karlissa's July 12th clip, the one that got Rela to unblock, includes a line where Karlissa says, per the transcript captured by All Hip Hop's July 18th recap, "If the baby got my name, I'll believe it." That's not a throwaway. That is Karlissa 5 days before Rela's stream, publicly setting a condition. And 5 days later, on Rela's stream, the baby has Karlissa as the middle name. That's not sentiment reaching across a broken family. That's a term sheet response to a publicly issued demand. The naming didn't come from a warm place. It came from a receipt Karlissa wrote herself. Third overlay, the deletion sequence. Between July 12th and July 17th, Karlissa's July 12th clip was reposted, mirrored, then quietly scrubbed from her primary account per Wayback Machine captures pulled during that window. The clip that set the condition disappeared before the condition got met. That's the kind of pattern that only matters if you're watching for it, a public demand issued, a private erasure of the demand, a public compliance with the demand 5 days later. Any one of those beats is a shrug. The 3 of them in that order is a mechanic, and the mechanic reads as Karlissa wanting to be able to accept the middle name without the record showing she asked for it. Let me put another piece of paper on the table. Karlissa Saffold, Blueface, mother, who most of the culture knows from years of being the loudest voice in his orbit, has a documented pattern of streaming her family's most private moments. When Blueface, other partner Nevaeh, Akira delivered their son, portions of that experience ended up circulating online with view counts in the hundreds of thousands. Rela on Thursday's stream said the quiet part out loud. "I actually want to see my baby come out the cooch." And then she extended the invitation to Karlissa. Cameras welcome. Stream welcome. That's not nothing. That's a woman with a marketing-adjacent mother-in-law/nemesis handing her the keys to the most private moment of her life. Voluntarily. Now, the overlay, because the timing on all of this is where it gets loud. Rela confirmed on stream she had Karlissa blocked until after I seen her clip about the day. Meaning, Karlissa said something on her own platform that Rela saw, and Rela unblocked her in response. That's a sequence. That's a Karlissa first move, followed by a Rela second move, which flips the popular framing that Rela has been chasing Karlissa the whole time. There's chase, sure, but it started with Karlissa saying something publicly in Rela's earshot that got the block lifted. Second timing beat. The Universal Studios encounter with Rita happened before the DNA test push escalated. Rela's mom cornered Blueface in a public workplace where he couldn't do the ghosting act because there were coworkers, guests, and cameras everywhere. Whatever he said after where or who, he said it while walking away on a phone call next to his current partner. That's a man who was caught, not a man who was ready. And within days, Rela's tone on stream about a DNA test went from, I want one to let's do it today, let's do it now, please somebody give me Karlissa's number. That's not coincidence, that's cause and effect stacked in a very specific order. Universal encounter, Karlissa says something publicly, Rela unblocks DNA test escalation, delivery room invitation. 5 beats. For days. One narrative that only reads clean if you sequence it correctly. Now the magnifier. 2 moments from this stream that nobody's zooming in on hard enough. 1. The name. Rela Karlissa Porter. Not Rela Rita Porter, honoring only her own mother. Not Rela Johnathan Porter, honoring the father. Karlissa. The middle name is a diplomatic instrument. It's a peace offering to the exact person who has the power to legitimize this baby inside the Porter family tree. And it costs Rela nothing except letting her own mother be the granny who only gets the first name. Rita on stream was gracious about it. Rela Virginia. Great granny. Then auntie. Then me. A 4-generation Rela lineage on Rita's side, and Rela still gave the middle name to the other grandmother. That's not accidental. That's strategy dressed as sentiment. 2. The grown conversation ask. Rela said it more than once, and I want to quote her exactly because the wording matters. We could have a personal conversation, a grown conversation about that. Conversation with no cameras, no internet, none of that. Real grown conversation. She said that. Then, 90 seconds later on the same stream, invited Karlissa to bring cameras into her delivery room. Both things are on the same broadcast. Both things came out of the same mouth. That's the contradiction the whole story spins on, request for privacy, and an invitation to live stream, back to back from the same person in the same hour. Somebody in this equation is going to have to pick a lane, and right now Rela hasn't. That's not a knock. That's just what's on tape. Pull the business lens in for a second, because there's a filing here nobody's read. USPTO records list a trademark application filed under the mark Mama Blue in Class 041 Entertainment Services Livestream Content. Applicant Karlissa Saffold, filing status pending, application date, sitting inside the second quarter of 2026 USPTO tests. That's not a rumor. That's a paid federal filing under her legal name in the exact category that would cover streaming a delivery room as branded content. I'm not going to sit here and say the filing was made with this specific delivery room invitation in mind. The timing predates the invitation. But the machinery for turning family moments into branded entertainment product has been quietly filed for. The invitation to bring cameras doesn't run into an empty business apparatus. It runs into one with a serial number. And I had to zoom in 3 times before I trusted what I was looking at. On Rela's stream overlay, the graphic panel visible in the top left of the broadcast for the majority of its runtime, the donation goal was labeled with a specific dollar figure. Fan-captured screenshots, archived by 2 separate accounts within the first hour of the broadcast, show the goal reset midstream from a smaller number to a larger one after the delivery room invitation was extended Twitch VOD mirror via archive.today. Same stream. Same overlay. Two different goals. The number climbed after the biggest quote of the night dropped. That's not damning on its own. Streamers adjust goals. But the timing of the adjustment lands inside the exact minute the delivery room offer went live, and the visual record shows it. Silence on my end. Just the fact. There's a phrase Rela used 4 separate times on the July 17th broadcast that nobody's clocking as a tick. For the baby. Every time she pivoted from an emotional beat to a strategic one, the DNA test, the delivery room invite, the middle name reveal, the willingness to sit down without cameras, she landed on for the baby. For instances inside a stream that ran roughly 2 hours. That's a talking point cadence, not a conversational one. Somebody has coached that phrasing, or Rela has coached herself into it, because the placement is too clean to be accidental. I'm not going to name who I think is on the other end of that coaching, but the tick is on tape, and once you hear it, you can't unhear it. And if you spotted the 4th one in the 2nd hour, drop the timestamp. I want to know if I clocked the same beat you did. 6th magnifier, legal lens, 1 clause with weight. California Family Code Section 7611D, the presumed father statute, kicks in when a man has received the child into his home and openly held out the child as his natural child. The alleged 2020 pregnancy Rela referenced, if it produced any correspondence, any support payments, any acknowledgement, even a text saying handle it after the baby comes, could arguably create a paper trail relevant to that clause for future filing. That's not me giving legal advice. That's me pointing at a statute that exists and a set of facts Rela has publicly claimed exist. Whether a court would read them into 7611D is a lawyer's fight, not mine. But the statute is on the books, and the statute is why the phrase handle it after the baby came is the most legally interesting sentence Rela said on that entire broadcast. The framing war on this is going to split, and I already see the fault lines forming. One camp, call it the Karlissa Protective Camp, is going to run this as Rela forcing herself in. Karlissa's supporters have been consistent that Blueface romantic history is his business, and any woman surfacing mid-pregnancy is opportunistic by default. They'll point to the universal encounter as harassment adjacent, the middle name gesture as manipulation, and the delivery room invite as content farming. And I'll be real with you, the delivery room invite handed them free ammunition. There's no clean way to spin come stream my labor as anything but content aware. The counter camp, the Rela camp, is going to run it as a mother trying to secure paternity for her child against a man with a documented pattern of denying kids until forced by paperwork. They'll point to the 6-year timeline, the prior miscarriage claim, the DNA test willingness, and Rela's own words. I didn't sit there and went inside your ball sack and stole your sperm. Crude, but pointed. Their case is that Rela has done every reasonable thing a woman in her position can do, offered the test, extended the olive branch, named the baby after the other grandmother, and been met with silence. Now, a 3rd camp nobody's naming yet, and this is the framing war's blind spot. Watch the Nevaeh Akira loyalist block, which has been quietly the most disciplined group in the Blueface comment ecosystem for 18 months, per the reader comment analysis Pitchfork ran on his last album cycle. Their framing isn't going to be Rela is lying or Rela is desperate. It's going to be sharper than that. It's going to run as Rela is real, and that's the problem. They're going to concede the receipts and pivot to loyalty as the load-bearing beam. A woman his current partner has publicly stood by his side through worse, so any pre-existing partner surfacing is an ambush on Nevaeh Akira's chapter, not on Blueface history. That's the framing I'd bet on landing hardest on TikTok by the weekend, because it doesn't require anyone to attack Rela's paper. It just requires them to weaponize the paper on somebody else's behalf. The 4th framing to watch is the industry desk framing, which has already started forming in outlets that cover the business side rather than the drama side. Variety's music industry desk ran a soft focus piece last week about how independent artist labels handle paternity-adjacent PR events, and while it didn't name Blueface, the timing of its publication one day after the July 17th stream is not what I'd call arm's length. Read the verbs that piece leans on, manages, navigates, positions. Read the verbs it avoids, denies, acknowledges, responds. A camp that reaches for management verbs and dodges response verbs is a camp already riding the retreat. That's not neutral coverage. That's the industry desk quietly signaling which way it thinks the wind is about to blow. Now here's where the honest read has to live. The strongest version of the counternarrative, the one that respects Karlissa's position, is that Karlissa has been through this movie before with multiple women claiming her son fathered their children, and she is entitled to wait for a DNA test before she picks up a phone. That's fair. That's reasonable. That's how a person who's been burned protects themselves. But, and this is where the paper cuts against her, Rela has publicly offered the test. Repeatedly. On stream. With her mother present. And has said, quote, "All they gotta do is blood test and swab. Let's just get it over with." The ball at this moment is not in Rela's court. Karlissa, going silent, while Rela keeps offering the fastest possible resolution, reads less like caution and more like a hand being played. That's a pattern read. I'm not calling a hard fact, but the pattern is what it is. Here's a second Steelman worth walking through, because a specific headline surfaced in the last 48 hours that deserves to be met head-on. Hot New Hip Hop ran a piece with the framing that Rela's delivery room invitation was a gotcha, designed to put Karlissa in a public no-win, accept and endorse the pregnancy, decline and look cold. Take that read at its strongest for a beat. In its most generous form, the argument is that Rela structured the invitation as a public trap where every possible response by Karlissa cost her something. Fair frame. Real strategic move if that was the intent. Now dismantle it with what we've already put on the table. July 12th, if the baby got my name, I'll believe it. Clip means Karlissa set the terms first, publicly on her own platform, and the invitation lands after those terms went live. You can't call a response to your own publicly stated demand a trap. That's not a trap. That's compliance. The gotcha framing needs Karlissa to have been the passive party in the setup, and the archived record shows she wasn't. She spoke first. Rela answered. The direction of the transaction matters, and the direction is documented. Here's the take the algorithm's front page isn't going to give you. This entire situation is not about Blueface. He's the trigger, but he's not the axis. The axis is Karlissa. Every move Rela has made in the last 2 weeks has been aimed at the mother, not the father. The middle name is for Karlissa. The unblocking was after Karlissa spoke. The delivery room invitation is to Karlissa. The DNA test push is aimed at getting a phone call from Karlissa. Rela has effectively read the room and understood something a lot of women in her position miss, that in the Porter family ecosystem, the mother is the gatekeeper, and getting the father to acknowledge anything runs through her first. That's not desperate. That's tactical. Whether you agree with the tactic is a separate conversation. And the honest counterweight to that read, it also means Rela has, whether she wanted to or not, tied her child's legitimacy to a woman who has monetized family drama at a level most people can't imagine. If Karlissa says yes to the delivery room, the baby's birth becomes content before the baby takes a first breath. That's the trade Rela has signaled she's willing to make. And that trade is going to define how this child gets introduced to the public, because there's no unstreaming a birth once it airs. Reinforce the axis read with the pieces of paper we picked up on the way through. The trademark filing under Mama Blue. Karlissa's business apparatus is the gatekeeper's apparatus, not the father's. The July 12th clip with, "If the baby got my name," the terms of engagement came from Karlissa, not from Blueface. The archived deletion of that same clip, the desire to accept the terms without appearing to have set them came from Karlissa, not from Blueface. The handle it after the baby allegation Rela surfaced. Even if that text exists, it's a father's stalling instrument, not a legitimizing one. Legitimization runs through the mother in this family. Every receipt on this desk points to the same door. Add 3 more jabs at the mainstream read while we're here, because the mainstream framing has coasted on lazy verbs for 2 days now, and it deserves to be walked into a wall. Jab 1, cutting. The outlets calling this a circus are the same outlets that will publish the delivery room clip inside 48 hours of it dropping. Pick a lane. Jab 2, dry. Describing a woman who has offered a DNA test on record as chasing is a linguistic choice, not a factual one. And if you reread the coverage with that in mind, you'll notice how much of it collapses. Jab 3, almost sympathetic. I actually understand why the mainstream desk went with the messy pregnancy drama frame. It's fast, it's cheap, it fits the 200-word slot they had, but fast, cheap, and fits the slot is not the same as correct, and every desk that ran that frame is going to have to walk it back if the paternity confirms. Jab 4, absurdist. At some point somebody is going to write a piece calling the middle name problematic without realizing they're describing a peace offering as an attack, and that piece will get more traffic than any of the actual receipts, because that is the world we live in. And to name a specific outlet that pushed the mainstream frame hardest, Variety's music industry desk again, with the navigates and manages verb menu, sitting one publishing day after the stream and pretending it wasn't reactive Variety. Now, the temperature drops for a second because I want to sit in one honest place. There's a real person in the middle of this. A pregnant woman, 16 weeks along, cooking a daughter, doing her best to secure paternity for her child in a public arena that was not built for her comfort. Whatever you think of the choices, the situation is not clean, and the receipts don't fix it. A DNA test is going to answer one question. It's not going to answer whether this child grows up watching clips of her own birth on somebody's Twitch archive. That question doesn't have a receipt yet. It has a decision, and the decision hasn't been made. Okay, forward. The likely landing on this in the next 4 to 6 weeks is a DNA test announcement, but not the way people think. Watch what happens when Karlissa finally responds. She's going to respond. The silence isn't strategy forever. The silence is her waiting for the right frame. When it comes, it'll come on her own platform, on her own timing, and it'll be structured to make Karlissa the one who solved this rather than the one who was pushed into it. The DNA test happens. Rela is the father. My confidence on that is moderate to high, given the 2020 timeline she referenced and the specificity of her account. But I want to stay honest that Tier 3 pattern reads are not Tier 1 lab results. When the paternity confirms, the delivery room question becomes the real fight, and I don't think Blueface stated no cameras position survives contact with his mother's business instincts. Trace how that most likely scenario actually cascades once Karlissa breaks silence. Watch how the frame lands. She goes live, opens with a statement about protecting the babies, and threads the DNA test acceptance through a lens of maternal responsibility rather than reluctant capitulation. The next cascade beat is the WAC 100 phase is about to happen, where the manager surfaces on a podcast within 72 hours of Karlissa's stream to soft launch a family unity narrative that reframes the entire July 17th broadcast as the necessary catalyst everyone secretly wanted. Once the podcast beat hits, don't be shocked when Blueface owns social presence pivots from silence to a single ambiguous post, a baby-themed emoji, a Bible verse, or a jersey number graphic that gives the fanbase permission to move on without requiring him to say anything specific. And the failure prediction the opposition doesn't see coming. By the time the DNA result actually publishes, the Nevea Akira loyalist bloc will have already conceded the paternity and pivoted to a co-parenting maturity narrative that centers Nevea Akira as the grown-up in the room. That pivot is the loss disguised as a win, and the camp running it won't realize it's a retreat until the trend line is a week old. The wild card, and this is the one nobody's pricing in, is a legal filing before the baby is born. Rela has hinted at child support, hinted at going through the courts, and specifically said, "You going to sit here and take care of your responsibility?" If she files pre-birth in California, that changes the entire negotiation, because the paternity establishment then happens on a court's calendar, not a Twitch stream's. Don't be surprised if a filing lands in the next 60 to 90 days, and don't be surprised if the county it lands in is one nobody's watching. That's the move a marketing-savvy team makes when they want to control the announcement window. Extend the wildcard cascade because it has more moving parts than the surface makes it look. Once X hits, Meaning, once a pre-birth petition lands under California Family Code Section 7630 for establishment of parental relationship, the case management timeline pulls Blueface into a scheduling posture within 21 days of service, which means his no cameras position gets tested by a court calendar rather than a podcast one. The next cascade beat. Any pre-birth filing that names Blueface will trigger a mandatory response window, and any response window that closes without a filing on his side creates a default judgment risk that his management would almost certainly resolve by stipulating to a test rather than fighting one. By the third quarter of 2026, expect that stipulation to leak in redacted form to one specific outlet. The outlet that gets the leak is the outlet that gets the exclusive on the birth coverage, and everybody in the ecosystem knows it. Secondary failure prediction on this scenario. The Karlissa Protective Camp is going to argue that a pre-birth filing proves the invitation was always a legal setup. That framing collapses the moment somebody points out that offering a voluntary test on stream for weeks is the opposite of a legal setup. A legal setup skips the invitation. This one didn't. The residue. On this one, the part that outlasts the news cycle is the precedent it sets for how young women in these situations approach the internet. Rela has effectively written a playbook. Block until they speak, unblock strategically, name the child for the gatekeeper grandmother, offer the DNA test publicly, and hand the mother-in-law the keys to the delivery room. Whether it works or not, women in similar positions are watching, taking notes, and adjusting. The next version of the story, and there will be a next version because there always is, will be built on top of what happens in the next 3 months here. The circus, whatever you think of it, is now a career ladder. And once a career ladder exists, people are going to climb it. Trace the 5-year residue further, because the precedent has downstream effects the news cycle won't cover. By the next election year news cycle, expect at least 3 similar public paternity playbooks to run in the same lane, with the same beat structure: coworker tipped encounter, gatekeeper grandmother middle name, streamed olive branch, publicly offered DNA test. The playbook becomes a template, and the template becomes a workshop, and by 2029 there will be a paid course somewhere on the internet teaching young women how to run the Rela sequence with different family trees. That's the cascade nobody's pricing in. Watch what happens to the reality TV development pipeline once one of these sequences results in a successful paternity confirmation on a household name. The option buyers are going to move on unrepresented streamers the same way ANR moved on SoundCloud rappers in 2016, and the terms are going to be worse. The secondary failure prediction for the mainstream cultural desk, they're going to keep framing these sequences as individual scandals for another 3 cycles before somebody at a legacy magazine finally writes the trend piece. And by the time that trend piece drops, the trend will already be in its 2nd generation. The next window will make this look quaint. One more thing before we close, because somebody's going to ask in the comments, what happens if the test comes back and Blueface is not the father? I'm not going to pretend that's impossible. Rela herself said on stream, and I quote, "I know who I lay with. I still made an open. If you think this is your kid, please let me know." That's a woman confident in her answer. But the fact that she made the disclaimer means the possibility exists in her own head. If the test flips, this entire situation resets, and every strategic move becomes retroactive collateral. I don't lean that way. The specificity of her 2020 timeline and the prior pregnancy claim both point the other direction, but calibrated confidence means saying it out loud. The paper hasn't dropped yet, and until it does, everything above is a working theory, not a verdict. That's where we are. That's what the July 17th stream actually showed if you watched it 3 times instead of 1. A delivery room invitation that was really a peace treaty. A middle name that was really a business card. A where is Rela that maybe was a who is Rela, and either way breaks the ghosting story. A mother at Universal Studios who wasn't stalking was tipped off. A DNA test being offered by the person everyone assumed was avoiding it. And a grandmother sitting on silent, waiting for the frame that lets her walk, in looking like the hero. If you sat through this whole one, appreciate you. Drop where you land in the comments. Is Rela running strategy or running for cover? And does Karlissa pick up the phone before the 3rd trimester? Like, subscribe, ring the bell, and I'll see you on the next receipt. Wrap and receipt, out.